Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme we'll be asking the question that we all want to know: can Liz Truss survive as our Prime Minister? And in this programme this week I'm joined by my good friend Robin Benson, together also my good friend Alistair Scott. So thank you so much for being here for the programme. I'll start off with you, Robin. I mean, this is the question that everyone is asking, particularly in politics. Can our new Prime Minister Liz Truss survive? She's only been in office for about 40 days. And just when we think that our politics can't become any more turbulent and chaotic, we have just a ludicrous situation where effectively we have a Prime Minister in Liz Truss, but she's in office but not in power, and this is the exact headline of the Daily Mail recorded on Tuesday the 18th of October. So what are your thoughts on this whole situation surrounding Liz Truss?
Well, I think, Simon, we were talking before we started the programme, whoever gets into number 10, this is a poison chalice because of the, perilous state of our finances. You know, it's going to be a challenge for whoever's there. Whether she survives or not, I think if we'd asked that question yesterday or even Sunday, probably the answer would have been, nah, not likely. But I think, things change in politics so fast these days that 24 hours later, well, maybe she will. But she's undermined. Yeah. I mean, she's lost authority in her party. I would think amongst Conservative voters, never mind Conservative Party members, but those who would vote Conservative, she's lost authority too. They've no confidence in her because of what's happened, because all the major policies that she put forward in her campaigning for the post of Prime Minister have just been shredded in the last 24 hours by her new Chancellor. So what has she got left to offer the country? What has she got left to offer the Conservative members of Parliament and the Conservative membership? Not a lot.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know such a turbulent time in British politics as we're seeing now, and we thought that the Boris Johnson years were trouble enough, but I mean, Liz Truss has only been in office for 40 days, but this has got to be the worst start of any Prime Minister probably in the history of this nation, because what her main problem is that she can't express herself very well, she can't communicate very well. And we're left guessing what her policy is, what her policy situation is. But it seems behind the scenes that she was told to sack Kwasi Kwarteng, her Chancellor, and her closest political ally in the cabinet, or you'll go. And of course, then they brought Jeremy Hunt in as Chancellor to steady the ship, and that's what he's done. But effectively, he's ripped up 32 of her tax breaks pledges and just ripped them up in order to secure the markets. And he looks like he's come in with a force of stability. And so the question is Liz Truss actually running the country anymore? Or is it Jeremy Hunt that's now effectively our de facto Prime Minister?
It's absolutely true, isn't it? It's like Robin said. She came in with a difficult situation, like the Queen dying literally practically after shaking hands with Liz Truss. 2 days later, she's no more. And that obviously became a distraction. The question I ask about this whole thing, she's the Prime Minister, chosen by the chosen few of the Conservative Party, not necessarily by the general population. But she and Kwasi Kwarteng were newbies, basically. They hadn't, Liz Truss had been Foreign Minister for a certain amount of time, but not in the same way. Neither of them had those sort of positions for long. Where were the advisors? I can see now that they've brought in Jeremy Hunt because he's a safe pair of hands. He's been around for decades, and he's had various leadership roles in the cabinets various times, and he came second to Boris in the Prime Minister's conflict last time. So where were the advisors saying, what's your policies going to be? Because as Robin just said, everything that she and Kwasi Kwarteng worked on as their first mini budget, whatever you want to call it, have just been ripped apart. And now we've got this kind of very stable policy that's coming through. And yeah, Jeremy Hunt, as an experienced man, is obviously sitting there with the possibility that he could take over the reins at any time. I would like to say, yes, I believe she can survive. Whether she will survive really depends on the Conservative Party at this time, because they've seen controversy after controversy, they've seen crisis after crisis, they've seen the general public losing confidence in their previous Prime Minister. The media too are on a roll against the Conservative Party at this time. And whether they feel that another change of leadership in 40 days, as you say. I mean, Kwarteng was only in office 38 days and he was out in the USA and gets a call, come back home, and there's his P45 waiting for him. It's a weird time, and as you say, I'm slightly older than you, not much, slightly older than you, and I can't remember any time in politics quite as crazy as this, even going back to my teenage years when I wasn't that interested.
Rishi Sunak, our former Chancellor, did warn Liz Truss during the leadership campaign to become the next leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister that now was not the time for tax cuts. And of course what Jeremy Hunt has done as the Chancellor has been very prudent, because he's recognised the urgent need to reduce our deficit and also to cut public spendings and get the economy on a even footing, and get so our economy is even keel and has the support of the financial markets and brings stability to financial markets before you can introduce billions and billions of pounds of tax cuts that you can't actually afford. And of course there was big black holes in her budget. But what does that say about her as a Prime Minister? The fact that she had really 2 weeks to prepare properly with Kwasi Kwarteng, this mini budget, to walk through the implications of how the markets would react, where the black holes were. Was she so dogmatic in this ideology that she wanted to pursue of tax cuts that she didn't really look at the kind of economic reality of the situation? Or did they choose to ignore that? And then, of course, everything that she put forward has been completely ripped up, shredded to bits. Has probably cost people so much more money in kind of mortgage repayments, put the country on a dangerous economic footing, all because she didn't do her maths properly.
Well, from my background reading, it seems to me that she didn't consult. No. Or she did, it was with a very limited number of people who seemed to agree with her. So she looked, it's like she looked for advice from those who would say, yes, that's fine. And instead of spreading out the, as you pointed out, Alistair, the seeking out of advice from a wider range of people who understand how the whole economic system is going at the moment, who might have actually advised her, well, you really can't do that, because there'll be the reaction that we saw to the mini budget. But I wonder, Simon, in all honesty, can any of them fix the economy? I mean, they can tinker with it, they can maybe put some band-aids on it, but our economy is so closely linked to the global economy. And the global economy, some of it is to do with the virus and the after effects of that. We need to recognize that, but the global economy is in a shambles. So, ours is so closely linked, as are so many other Western or Westernized nations, into a global setup. How far they can actually go to rescue us, in inverted commas, from this situation, I think is debatable. I mean, we're not quite linked at the hip with the American economy, but we're linked pretty closely with it. And the American economy is going down the toilet, and it has been, even while Donald Trump was in the presidency, it was already heading that direction. So if the US economy is going down and the European economy is struggling, and we've got a war going on between, effectively between Europe, the USA, and Russia, backed by Iran and China, we are in uncharted territory, I think. And whoever is in number 10, I go back to what I said, it's a poison chalice, and we're in for a very, I think, bumpy, difficult winter, and probably well into 2023.
I also think that the whole, we were sort of concerned about being controlled by EU before, and Brexit has come along and cut off those sort of controlling efforts. But now when you see what's happened in the last 2-3 days or last week, who is really governing our country? Is it the International Monetary Fund, or is it our cabinet? Good question.
Well, that's a big question. We know, for example, that the policies that Liz Truss wanted to pursue were essentially against the kind of globalist policies, against the influence of the World Economic Forum. She wanted to pull our government out of the UN climate change agreement, particularly in regards to zero carbon emissions that is causing this massive great energy cost. So we're having to rely on wind and solar power that is essentially pushing our energy bills through the roof because we're not producing enough electricity to meet the demands. And so therefore the end of reliable energy has gone out the window in pursuit of these green renewable energies. So she wanted to address that. She put the people like Penny Mordaunt onto the back, who was tipped to become the Deputy Prime Minister, and even then the papers are also looking at her as a possible next leader to replace her, and she is definitely a puppet of the WEF. And so therefore she wanted to have a break with the past, go back to a kind of more kind of patriotic nationalism, put education at the centre. So her ideas are good, but the question is, does she have the political strength and the political capital now, because she's so badly wounded, to carry on? And of course, with the general election less than 2 years away, you have to ask the kind of big question, and this is the question that the Conservative Parliamentary Party are asking right now: is she fit enough to lead us into an election? Is she able to unite us behind her manifesto? But the public don't like her. She's too awkward. She can't communicate. And of course, this will be her undoing. And sometimes you have to admit that the job is too big for her to do.
Yeah, I mean, in her recent interview on the news a couple of days ago, she did apologise, and as you say, a lot of what she's carrying is great and would be popular with the British people. Because it's kind of nationalistic without going too far, and we do want. That's why we cut off from the Europe control. But as she said in her apology, we believe what we're doing was right, but we pushed it too soon, too fast. And I guess that's where she's really failed. As you say, communication skills are probably not her best positive role. But also, I have a feeling, watching her, she is being controlled. Obviously, she knows she's had a bad start, but I think she must have started with this sort of euphoria of being, I'm the Prime Minister, and almost pushed things too fast. I mean, Trump was a bit like that when he took on the presidency. He just pushed.
Yeah, but didn't do U-turns. He didn't do
no, he didn't.
U-turns.
No, that was the one thing. He would never turn back and say I was wrong. He would just keep going, and it doesn't matter who came in the way.
I mean, there is an argument, isn't there, to say that all she had to do was kind of ride out the storm and say that this lady's not for turning, like her political role model in Margaret Thatcher, and just ride out that wave, take the political criticism and stay strong. But now she looks so weak that she has appealed to this element of the party, the left of the party. Now she's upset the right of the party. Now she hasn't united anyone behind the country, and now the rest of the country actually hate her. That even, for example, what she did in Parliament on Monday, the 17th of October, that she didn't address the Parliament directly, and she got her arch enemy and opponent for the leadership, Penny Mordaunt, to speak for her. And Penny Mordaunt's own words is, no, the Prime Minister's not hiding under the desk. I mean, it doesn't look good, does it?
No, it doesn't. But, we had the announcement of the mini budget, okay? And within days, an area that she and the rest of the government have no control over, or at least apparently have no control over, the markets were, weeping and wailing, and the pound went down to parity with the dollar, which, again, like you, not that I've been monitoring this all my life, but I've never known anything like that to happen. So the Bank of England and the markets just lost confidence in this government with the click of the finger, and that had a ripple effect. And actually what Jeremy Hunt has done is in the light of that. So she was contending with areas of the economy that actually she has very little control over, and they decided, we're not having this, And the fact, yes, I think part of the problem was that she did not thoroughly enough explain why she wanted to make the cuts or the changes to the system, the tax and all the other things, and it left people thinking, okay, where's the money going to come from to pay for all these cuts? And she couldn't explain that, and that only exacerbated the lack of confidence, and it just became a rolling snowball that brought us to the situation that we did, where the previous Chancellor got the boot, as you say, I think as a text on his way back from the States, and Jeremy Hunt has jumped in, or been brought in, and as many of the media outlets are saying effectively, he's the Prime Minister in all but name.
Absolutely.
I think what you said also about her not being like Maggie Thatcher and saying, this woman, I'm not for turning or whatever, I don't think she had the backing of the party. It's a total different situation. Thatcher that wasn't within her first 2 weeks of being Prime Minister when she made that speech, the woman's not for turning. It was well into her role as Prime Minister. And you could see even by the voting for Rishi and Liz Truss, it was a close run thing right through to the end. She didn't have the full backing of a Conservative party for her to make a statement like that. It would have been good for the public to hear it, but I think the backstabbers in the party the globalists were already looking for a way to get her out. And that's something we need to be praying into, because we really don't want that as believers in our nation, being controlled by the globalist crowd. So we need to be praying, God, you allowed her. She was chosen. God chose her for a season, whether it's 10 weeks or less or longer, we don't know. But we don't want to hand it over into the hands of those who are going down that route, which we as believers don't want to see.
I mean, is the big difference, Robin, from the 1980s when kind of Margaret Thatcher was our Prime Minister to now is that we have members of Parliament who are not loyal to their own political party, but are loyal to the agenda of the globalists. So it doesn't matter what party you're in, they will unite, and if the globalists then decide that they want Keir Starmer as our next Prime Minister, they will unite behind him and do everything they can to undermine the current Prime Minister and goals and policies if she's pulling away from that agenda. Is this the scenario where we're in, where our members of Parliament are so corrupt that they're actually being controlled, and therefore they're not acting in the interest of their own constituents, nor are they acting in the best interest of the nation, but are actually serving a bigger agenda?
Yeah, in a worst case scenario, I think you're right. But I think also there's a bigger overarching issue or question maybe here. Why is God permitting this? And I don't have an answer to the question, okay?
Good question.
But it is a question that we as believers in Jesus, sometimes we need to take a step back from the stuff that we're being bombarded with by the media, whatever media we're getting our information from, and ask, Lord, what are you doing? Why are you allowing this? What is going on behind the scenes that we can't see, but that if we ask the Lord enough, we'll get some indication, at least to set our own hearts and minds at ease and reinforce the fact that even in the midst of all of this chaos, God is sovereignly in control of what's going on. Because it doesn't look like it on the human level to us, but He is, which means that He has, the old jargon, He has a plan and a purpose in what's going on. And I think sometimes we are too hasty to rush to judgment on just the superficial, and I don't mean that in a nasty sense, but just what we see on the surface, without asking the Lord, what are you doing in the midst of all of this? Why have you permitted this? Because there's a reason for it. There is a reason for it.
I mean, it's almost as if our nation is going through a shaking. And of course, nations that are chosen by God, and our nation has been chosen by God mightily in the past, to do great exploits for Him. There's no doubt about that. Together with the United States, there's more responsibility. And of course, what we've done is we've pushed Jesus out of the classroom. We pushed Him out of Parliament. We pushed Him out of the public sphere. It was only, I think, really the Queen's influence. And having thought about this for the last couple of days, I think what we're seeing, really witnessing now, is the role that the Queen played in interceding on behalf of our nation. And obviously then knowing the affairs of the state, knowing that she's no longer there, it's almost as if God has moved that hedge of protection, because she would have been praying for a prime minister, she would be praying for her ministers, and without a godly king, and we have to face facts, we don't have a godly king in King Charles III, that this is probably explains why we're facing so much turmoil, but also doesn't really explain the fact with the Conservative Party that they've just elected a new leader, and within 40-something days they want to out, and they want to try someone else. So these are the odds. I'm not a betting man, so I don't understand betting odds, but according to this week, Jeremy Hunt is 3-1. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, is 5-1. Penny Mordaunt is 8-1. Boris Johnson, returning, is 10-1. And Kemi Banderloch is 16-1, and Michael Gove is 16-1. So clearly, what we're seeing from here is that those would actually favour the possibility of really Jeremy Hunt or Ben Wallace becoming our next Prime Minister.
Well, I mean, I'm not too concerned about the odds and so on, because that's just the betting people looking to make money. So come on, put your bet on one or the other. Go for the.
Well, I'm not encouraging our viewers to bet in any way. I've never betted in my life, but I'm just saying these are the odds if there was.
This is what the media is reporting. Yeah.
It's true, and but there's no doubt we need to be interceding for the righteousness of God in our nation again. And there's no doubt, like you say, there is a shaking going on in our land, there's a shaking going on in the nations of the world, particularly to do with the economy. And we are sort of just coming out of one storm and walking into another storm, and you kind of feel there's a bigger storm even ahead. And I'm reminded of that scripture, I think it's in Psalm 20 verse 7, which says, some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we will remember the name of our Lord. And I think that's what God is doing by shaking our nation, is bringing us to the point, governmentally, commercially, bankology, whatever to say.
That's a new one.
That's a new one. I made that one up, by the way. In the church particularly, to remember that God is, like Robin has just said, God is in control, and he wants us to come back and acknowledge him. As soon as we do that as a nation, and as you say, our Queen was doing that on a regular basis, we need to be more determined to seek the Lord and pray, because that's what we're told to do in the midst of all the crisis. What does 1 Timothy 2 tell us to do? Pray for the kings and people and those in authority. That's not only our spiritual authority.
We may live peaceful lives.
Yeah, exactly. And we need to be praying for our Prime Minister as long as she's there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you touch on something very important, and what is God saying in this. But do you not also think that God is speaking to Liz Truss as well, to say, look, you've got no political allies anymore. You've got a party that's effectively wants you out. You've got the public against you. You probably posed the biggest shake-up in British foreign policy for probably 100 years, in suggesting that she wants to move the British embassy from Herzliya to Jerusalem. And we can't take that out of the equation in all of this, because she would have stirred up a spiritual hornet's nest, as the enemy's forces would have thought this is going to be a disaster. We don't want Britain to become a blessing to Israel. We don't want this nation to be blessed. And of course, that's exactly what would happen had she done it. So had she unleashed some dark forces that she can't, or is strong enough spiritually to be able to push back spiritually and also politically. And maybe this is the time that she cries out to God for help, and he reveals himself to her. Because, our nation is teetering on the edge, and, I'm not being party political at all, because, for this program, I'm staying politically neutral. At the moment, I wouldn't vote for any of the major political parties of where they stand, particularly on geo-Christian ideals. And so therefore the big question is, can she survive this? But I think she can only survive this with God's help if she turns to God, because otherwise she's going to be another Prime Minister cut by the wayside. We have a globalist PM who will pursue the globalist agenda, and before we know it, we'll see the breakup of the United Kingdom and lose British sovereignty, because that's virtually what's just around the corner if the Labour Party actually win the next election, which on all records, everything we're seeing now, it is on course.
Yeah, and I mean, I come back in some sense to reinforce what Alistair has said, that we need to be praying. I mean, I don't know where Liz Truss stands spiritually. I have no idea. And And I know that the scriptures do indicate to us that God can direct the heart of the king. I mean, it's one of the Proverbs, like a stream. But I don't think we should take, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to be doom merchant here, okay? But I don't think we should take that for granted. I wonder, actually, I shouldn't be laughing about it, I wonder if we just have moved to that point where God has just said, okay, guys, my hands are off this situation. You've gone the direction you want to go. Okay, off you go and see where that gets you. And then there are other issues in the Proverbs. I mean, I think it's in either chapter 1, chapter 2, where God's speaking through Solomon, or whoever wrote that particular section, says, I'm not going to answer your prayers. I'm not listening to you because you have moved so far away from following me, from being obedient to my word. I'm not going to answer. I mean, that is a terrible situation. I mean, obviously for Israel to get into, but it's this terrible situation for any nation to get into, where God says, okay, just go for it. See how well you do. I mean, and I honestly think there's a possibility that that's where we're at. And that's why we're seeing all of this chaos. Because as you said, and you said as well, God has just stepped back and taken the restraint away, and it's going to run however it's going to run. Yeah,
but that means it can only get worse then.
Yeah.
We've got about two minutes of the programme, and of course our viewers watching as well. We are blessed in that we live in a democracy where we are still able to vote and put a cross on a box to see who we elect as our political representatives. And that is vital. We still have freedom of speech. We still have freedom of assembly. We still have pretty much a free press, even though we know that our democratic institutions are massively under threat and are crumbling. That we also believe that God can do amazing things. So how should we be praying at this time for Liz Truss, knowing that she could be only days away from remaining in office?
We really have to pray that she has an encounter with the Lord and then becomes strong in that. But as Robin was saying, I'm just reminded of again 2 Chronicles 7 verse 14, talking about my people. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, turn from their wicked ways. He's talking about the people turning from their wicked ways, he will forgive sin and heal the land. Amen. So that's what we need to do.
Alistair, Robin, thank you so much for being my guest on this week's Politics Today, and I want to thank you at home. We are unprecedented political waters, and that's why it's imperative that we pray for Liz Truss, but we also pray that God's sovereign will be done in this situation. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics